if you've been aware of this channel for any amount of time, you will be in the knowledge that I am a massive Doctor Who fan. Or at least, for a certain period of time, I was. I think with recent things happening in the show and in my personal life, I felt a bit burnt out by Doctor Who. And I have had a thought that has swam around probably most Doctor Who fans' heads for a long time. Should Doctor Who go for a full-on reboot? And I think my opinion on this might interest you. Doctor Who for the past few years now, in my opinion, has been making adjustments to its own canon and continuity, which is fine. A lot of shows do, a lot of long-running series do, especially something like Doctor Who, which has been going for nearly 60 years now. People are going to want to change up continuity and put their own stamp on the show, which is fine, but for me, they are changing certain things that are integral to the show. The Timeless Child arc is a controversial decision for a lot of Doctor Who fans, and indeed it is an idea that has spread back to the classic series, with the idea of the Doctor being a Time Lord referred to as the Other. In Jodie Whittaker's era they made it, and it puts, in my opinion, too much importance on the character of the Doctor. If you're unaware of the story arc, the Doctor discovers that they are an ancient being referred to as the Timeless Child, a kind of precursor to Time Lord civilization, who is the root of things like regeneration. And as I just mentioned, I think that puts far too much importance on the character of the Doctor. For me, the Doctor is a runaway Time Lord who, even by his own species standards, isn't that smart. With the Timeless Child arc, I feel like you're suddenly making the Doctor the most important figure of Time Lord society. But this has been going on, in my opinion, since the show came back in 2005. Russell loved giving Tennant the big monologues of,
I'm the Doctor. I'm a Time Lord. I'm from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation of Kasterborous. I'm 903 years old, and I'm the man who's going to save your lives and all 6 billion people on the planet below. You got a problem with that?
No.
In that case, Halsey?
I was fine with when it came to like, oh yes, the Doctor is the hero of the story, but he still comes from this little Gallifreyan society. And indeed, in the classic series, there are often mentions to the Doctor not even passing at the academy.
I may be inexperienced, but I did graduate from the academy with a triple first.
I suppose you think we should be impressed by that too.
Well, it's better than scraping through with 51% at the second attempt.
That information is confidential.
But all of a sudden, when you add the Jodie Whittaker Timeless Child arc in, and indeed when they're constantly calling back to it, just makes the character of the Doctor seem so important, and that's not what interests me in the character of the Doctor. The show, in my opinion, at the minute is stuck in a nostalgic haze, constantly calling back to episodes from yesteryears. And I feel like, especially with David Tennant returning, the show is scared to move forwards. The show is scared to change, which in my opinion Doctor Who is all about change. And throughout my time as a Doctor Who fan, I have had many discussions with people, and my opinion on what I'm about to say has changed a lot. I think it might be time for Doctor Who to reboot. It's been going for 60 years now, unabridged, and I'm going to try and tell you why I think Doctor Who should reboot. First reason, I think Doctor Who's long-running continuity puts a lot of people off of the show. And indeed I feel when you're now trying to pitch Doctor Who to a more international audience, especially with the Disney Plus years and, you know, Doctor Who going back to Series 1, people are put off by, you know, there have been nearly 15 previous Doctors over 60 years, and some of that goes back to it being in black and white. I think that puts off a lot of modern viewers because it's a long-running continuity. People are wondering, where do you jump in? I think Doctor Who has jumping in spots. It's not impenetrable, but it does look that way, especially to a modern viewer. Especially nowadays when you've got John Pertwee action figures on the shelves, Paul McGann action figures. When the show came back in 2005, it was a very different landscape for the show. It had been going for nearly 15 years, and you couldn't buy Doctor Who toys. There was no Tom Baker action figure in 2005. So I think the show had an easier landing platform than it would have done if the classic series was still more in modern memory, especially with people like Tom Baker and Paul McGann. And I'm not saying, people were aware of the classic series in 2005. Daleks are still a cultural icon to this day, and there's some great imagery from the classic series, but it wasn't as readily available as it is now. My next reason calls back to something I mentioned at the start of the video with the Doctor's character. If the show were to reboot and we were to jump way back to a new First Doctor leaving Gallifrey, I feel people might have, and indeed writers, would be able to incorporate these new characteristics of the Doctor in a much smoother fashion. I think the show would be able to reinvent itself in a way. And I know there are a lot of great modern Doctor Who things that people wouldn't... I know people would be scared of getting rid of certain things. I think you can keep iconic villains and iconic visuals of the show, but repurpose them and readapt them to a more modern vision, which I feel the show is too scared of doing at the minute. I think the show is clinging to the past, and I think a reboot may allow the show to reinvent itself in some way. I'm not talking about remaking classic stories. I think those stories obviously exist, and there are some great classic Doctor Who stories, but maybe the show could do with a reimagining for villains like the Daleks, who I think over the past few years have lost their threat and menace. I think you could reimagine the Daleks in a modern context, which would give the show a bit more life, especially with villains like the Cyberman, which I believe to be perfect for the modern technological landscape, especially with these big tech billionaires. A villain like the Cyberman would be perfect for a reimagining. And indeed there are great stories like the 10th Planet out there, but imagine if we got a whole new Cyberman backstory to fit in with the 21st century way of the show, or indeed a new pop culture landscape. In every series since 2005, Doctor Who has brought back a recurring villain. Daleks, Cyberman, Sutekh, the Master. And I think people nowadays aren't going to be interested in that because there's 60 years of history behind it for people who have to catch up on. And indeed that's almost impenetrable, especially with villains like Sutekh and Omega. I think it puts people off. So a reboot of the show, you would be able to move forwards and have new reinventions of these characters, new reinventions of these villains. Even the character of the Doctor in Time Lord Society, which for a long time people have said has lost its mysticism and its edge, with a reboot of the show, you would be able to you'd be able to give Doctor Who the wonder again. I think Doctor Who, as much as I love it, it has been running for too long now. It's nearly 60 years of established continuity, so obviously people are going to feel lost. Whereas if we say, okay, 15th Doctor, we're going to cut a gap, we're coming back to a new First Doctor leaving Gallifrey again, and let's see what adventures he has. Again, as I said earlier, I'm not advocating for a remake of the classic series. What I'd be advocating for are new stories told in a new continuity with new actors, maybe bringing back some older elements but keeping it as its own distinct thing, but you can tell it's Doctor Who. I don't think Doctor Who is going to reboot. I wouldn't if I was put in charge now. If I was put in charge right now, I wouldn't reboot the show. I don't have the confidence to do that. But it is something I think the BBC should be considering, especially with the modern televisual landscape, and Doctor Who didn't succeed on Disney Plus in the way people were hoping it would. I think Doctor Who it needs a fresh start, it needs some fresh blood. I don't think bringing Russell back was the right idea. I know I was I was one of the biggest complainers about the Chibnall era, the Jodie Whittaker era, because I did feel like the show was going in a direction that I didn't feel like the show should go in. And bringing Russell back, the show is no longer moving forwards, it's pulling itself backwards. And maybe a bit of fresh blood and a fresh continuity, the show would become the creative, high standard of sci-fi television that it always was. The formatting of Doctor Who also, I feel, has become very outdated. Doctor Who is no longer... The episodic nature of television no longer works in the way it does. If you ever look at any of the modern Star Wars shows on Disney+, they feel like 6-hour films cut into one episode blocks. Indeed, like the classic series used to feel like, with these big long serials over many weeks. That would tell one long story. Maybe Doctor Who should look into going something like that. Do, instead of these episodic series with 8 episodes, which in my opinion don't feel like enough, maybe Doctor Who should scale back. So instead of having an 8-episode episodic series, you'd have an 8-episode series with one story running through it, like the classic series. So you do the Daleks, and you'd have a series of a Dalek story which would last a series, and would then, you know, the Doctor would get in the TARDIS and go on to the next series with a new adventure, and it'd be formatted more cinematically. I think that's the way television is heading. I don't remember the last time I saw a really episodic series. They always pick up a few seconds after the previous episode, you know. So you're watching, especially with the modern age of binge watching, you're not watching 8 episodes of a show, you're watching one 8-hour movie. And maybe Doctor Who should start considering stuff like that. Well, I don't think this is going to happen though. Doctor Who is too entrenched in its own continuity, it's too popular, and I indeed believe the show will probably keep going as it is for a long time. I don't think the show is as popular as it once was, and I do believe rebooting might be a good way to get some fresh blood into the show, but who knows, time may tell. We don't, as far as I'm aware, have any news on what's going to happen after this upcoming Christmas special. I don't even know if we're going to get another series or the show's going to go on a hiatus. Maybe a hiatus is in the show's best aspirations. But until then, goodbye for now.
Subscribe if you enjoyed and want to see more content in future.